Greetings, seekers of wisdom, wanderers of the psyche, and lovers of life's great mysteries. Today, we embark on a journey into the heart of one of humanity's most enduring and enigmatic figures, the Fool. Through the lens of Carl Jung, the Swiss sage who plumbed the depths of the human soul, we will explore the Fool not as a mere clown or jester, but as an archetype, a timeless mirror of our innermost selves. The Fool is not just a figure of laughter or folly. It is a guide, a provocateur, and a beacon of transformation. So, let us step lightly, with open hearts and curious minds, into the dance of the Fool, where wisdom and madness intertwine. The Fool is one of the most relatable, intriguing, and recurring figures in the world. From the court jesters of medieval Europe to the tricksters of ancient myth, from the bumbling heroes of fairy tales to the anarchic clowns of modern cinema, the Fool has capered through human history, leaving laughter, chaos, and revelation in its wake. We worship folly by seeing it in others, in the world, and when we are brave enough in ourselves. As Carl Jung might say, the Fool is not a mere character. It is an archetype, a primordial image etched into the collective unconscious, a pattern of being that we all inherit at birth. Jung taught us that archetypes are the building blocks of the psyche, universal symbols that shape our dreams, myths, and stories. The Fool is among the most potent of these, embodying paradox, innocence and wisdom, chaos and order, vulnerability and courage. To encounter the Fool is to encounter ourselves in our rawest, most unguarded state before the masks of society, before the burdens of wisdom, before the fear of failure. Yet, in our modern world, many of us suffer from the absence of the Fool in our lives. Frenetic and upright, we take ourselves too seriously, striving to conform to a culture that prizes efficiency, productivity, and control. We become, as Jung warned, cogs in the machine, disconnected from the spontaneity and joy that the Fool represents. As William Shakespeare, that great bard of the human soul, wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." But we have forgotten our lines, forgotten that playfulness is a basic human need. We wonder why we grow bored, exhausted, and hollow, why our lives lack authenticity, passion, and meaning. Jung offers an antidote to invite the Fool archetype back into our lives. "The soul demands your folly, not your wisdom," he wrote, reminding us that the path to wholeness individuation requires us to embrace the absurd, the uncertain, and the playful. Let us begin with a story, for stories are the language of the psyche, the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. In a village nestled at the edge of a great forest, there lived a young man named Elias. Elias was no ordinary villager. He was the village fool. His clothes were patched and mismatched, his laughter too loud, his questions too bold. When the elders spoke of crops or trade, Elias would ask, "But why do the stars sing at night?" When the priest preached of sin, Elias would wonder, "Does God laugh when we stumble?" The villagers shook their heads, calling him simple, childish, mad. Yet children followed him, enchanted by his tales, and old women smiled secretly at his antics, as if he carried a spark of something they had long forgotten. One day, a shadow fell over the village. A drought withered the fields, and fear tightened the hearts of the people. The elders gathered, debating solutions, digging wells, praying harder, sacrificing goats. But Elias, uninvited, wandered into their council, juggling 3 apples. "Why not ask the river why it hides?" he said, tossing an apple into the air. The elders scoffed, but a young girl, emboldened by Elias's courage, piped up, "He's right! The river hasn't dried, it's changed its course." The villagers investigated and found the river, now flowing through a hidden gorge. Elias's folly had saved them, not through wisdom, but through a question no one else dared to ask. This story echoes Jung's understanding of the Fool as a catalyst for transformation. The Fool does not solve problems with logic or authority. It disrupts. It questions. It plays. In Jungian terms, the fool is a manifestation of the puer aeternus, the eternal child within us, untouched by the rigid structures of the ego. But the fool is also a trickster, a figure who dances on the edge of the shadow, the dark, repressed parts of the psyche. By embracing folly, we confront our fears of failure, ridicule, and the unknown, integrating the shadow into our conscious self. Jung believed that the psyche is a dynamic interplay of opposites, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, order and chaos. The fool, in its archetypal form, embodies this duality. It is both the innocent child, unburdened by the weight of convention, and the trickster who revels in disruption and deceit. To understand the fool, we must explore its relationship with the shadow, the hidden aspects of ourselves that we deny or suppress. Consider the medieval court jester, a figure Jung would have recognized as a living archetype. The jester was both insider and outsider, permitted to speak truths that others dared not utter. With his cap and bells, his fool's scepter, he mocked the king himself, yet remained untouchable, protected by his role. Why? Because the jester, like the fool archetype, served a psychological function. He gave voice to the shadow of the court, the doubts, fears, and absurdities that lurked beneath the surface of power. By laughing at the jester, the court released its tension, integrating the shadow without being consumed by it. But the fool's shadow is not always benign. Jung warned that archetypes, when unbalanced, can become destructive. The fool, if left unchecked, can descend into chaos, irresponsibility, or malice. We see this in the trickster, who delights in schadenfreude, the joy of another's misfortune. Unlike the fool, who laughs with others or at himself, the trickster laughs at others, using deception to assert power. In modern culture, we see this dark fool in figures like the Joker, Batman's nemesis, whose anarchic laughter masks a deep wound, a shadow unintegrated and unleashed upon the world. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires us to balance the fool with its opposite, the wise old man or woman, the archetype of wisdom and reflection. The fool alone is reckless, but the wise one alone is stagnant. Together, they form a dynamic unity, like the yin and yang of the psyche. As Jung wrote, "The fool's wisdom is to know his ignorance, and the wise man's wisdom is to embrace his folly." This paradox lies at the heart of the fool's psychology. To be whole, we must be both foolish and wise, playful and serious, free and grounded. To deepen our exploration, let us turn to myth and literature, where the fool archetype shines brightly. In the Arthurian legend of Parsifal, the young fool sets out on a quest for the Holy Grail, driven by naive curiosity rather than calculated ambition. Parsifal's folly, his refusal to follow his mother's cautious advice, leads him to the Grail Castle, where the wounded Fisher King languishes. Yet bound by politeness, Parsifal fails to ask the healing question: whom does the Grail serve? His folly, at first a gift, becomes a burden, and he wanders for 20 years before returning to ask the question that restores the king and the land. Jung saw Parsifal's journey as a metaphor for individuation. The Fisher King's wound represents the psyche's fragmentation, the loss of connection to the self, the center of the psyche that encompasses both conscious and unconscious. Parsifal's folly is his innocence, his willingness to leap into the unknown. But his growth requires him to integrate wisdom, to ask the question that bridges the conscious and unconscious. The fool, in Jung's view, is the initiate, the one who dares to begin the journey toward wholeness, even if he stumbles along the way. In literature, the fool takes many forms. In Dostoevsky's The Idiot, Prince Mishkin is a holy fool whose childlike innocence exposes the corruption of Russian society. His epilepsy and simplicity mark him as an outsider. Yet his compassion and insight reveal truths that others cannot see. Jung would recognize Mishkin as a figure of the self, embodying the union of opposites, innocence and wisdom, weakness and strength. Yet, Mishkin's tragedy is his inability to fully integrate into the world, a reminder that the fool's path is fraught with peril. In Cervantes' Don Quixote, the titular knight-errant is a fool driven mad by romantic ideals, tilting at windmills he mistakes for giants. His squire, Sancho Panza, grounds him with earthy realism, forming a classic Jungian pair, the dreamer and the pragmatist. Don Quixote's Folly is both his curse and his gift. For while he fails to change the world, he inspires those around him to see it anew. Jung might say that Don Quixote's madness is a rebellion against the collective unconscious's demand for conformity, a quixotic quest for individuation. The fool archetype finds its most vivid expression in the tarot, a system Jung studied for its symbolic richness. In the Rider-Waite deck, the fool is depicted as a young man standing at the edge of a cliff, a white rose in one hand, a bundle of possessions in the other. A dog yips at his heels, warning of danger, but the fool gazes skyward, absorbed in the promise of adventure. Numbered 0. The Fool is both the beginning and the end of the major arcana, the 22 cards that trace the soul's journey to wholeness. Jung saw the tarot as a map of the psyche, with each card representing an archetypal experience. The Fool is the initiate, the ego stepping into the unknown, driven by the call to adventure. The cliff symbolizes the leap of faith required for individuation, the willingness to surrender control and trust the unconscious. The dog, in Jungian terms, is the instinctual wisdom of the body, urging caution but also loyalty. The fool's journey through the arcana from the magician's mastery to the world's completion mirrors the hero's journey, a cycle of departure, initiation, and return. For Jung, the fool's 0 is profoundly symbolic. 0 is the void, the pleroma, the infinite potential from which all creation arises. It is the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its tail, symbolizing the eternal return and the unity of opposites. The fool, as 0, is the self in its nascent form, the spark of divinity within us all. Yet, the fool is also a warning. To linger in folly is to stagnate, to fall into the cliff of chaos. Individuation demands that the fool grow, integrating the lessons of the arcana to become the world, the cosmic dancer who embodies wholeness. In our modern world, the fool archetype is both a balm and a challenge. We live in an age of hyper-rationality, where data, metrics, and algorithms govern our lives. Jung would warn that this one-sidedness starves the psyche, repressing the fool's playfulness and creativity. We see the fool in the comedian who speaks truth to power, in the artist who defies convention, in the child who asks, why? Yet, we also see the fool's shadow in the troll who sows discord, in the influencer who chases clout at the expense of authenticity. To embrace the fool is to reclaim our capacity for wonder, to risk looking foolish in pursuit of truth. Jung's concept of active imagination, a dialogue with the unconscious, offers a way to engage the fool. By writing, painting, or dreaming without judgment, we invite the fool to speak, revealing insights hidden beneath our rational facades. The fool teaches us to laugh at ourselves, to see our flaws not as failures but as invitations to grow. But the fool also demands courage. To be a fool is to be vulnerable, to stand naked before the world's judgment. In Jungian terms, this is the confrontation with the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in. The fool strips away the persona, revealing the authentic self beneath. This is why the fool is heroic. It dares to be seen, to fail, to begin again. As Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The fool is our guide on this journey, whispering, "Leap, and the net will appear." Yet, the fool's path is not without pain. Jung recognized that archetypes carry both light and shadow, and the fool is no exception. The sad clown paradox captures this duality. The comedian who brings laughter to others often hides deep sorrow. Robin Williams, whose manic genius lit up stages and screens, battled depression and addiction, a tragic embodiment of the fool's shadow. Jung would see this as an imbalance, where the fool's outward playfulness masks an unintegrated wound. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is not evil, but neglected a repository of our repressed desires, fears, and traumas. The fool, in its purest form, integrates the shadow through laughter and play, transforming pain into connection. But when the shadow is ignored, the fool becomes destructive, descending into cynicism, nihilism, or self-destruction. The evil clown archetype embodied in characters like Pennywise or the Joker represents this shadow unleashed, a fool who has lost touch with the self and seeks only chaos. Jung's solution is to face the shadow, to dialogue with it through dreams, art, or therapy. The fool, with its fearless honesty, can guide us into the shadow's depths, helping us reclaim the parts of ourselves we have disowned. By laughing at our fears, by playing with our pain, we integrate the shadow, becoming more whole. The fool reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is a spark of light, a chance to begin anew. At its core, the fool is a hero, not in the traditional sense of slaying dragons, but in the Jungian sense of embarking on the quest for the self. The fool's heroism lies in its willingness to leap into the unknown, to embrace uncertainty, to trust the unconscious. This is the essence of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole by integrating the conscious and unconscious, the light and shadow, the fool and the wise one. Jung believed that the self is the archetype of wholeness, the divine spark within us all. The fool, as the initiate, is the self in its embryonic form, a seed of potential waiting to unfold. Through trials, failures, and revelations, the fool grows, learning to balance folly with wisdom, freedom with responsibility. This is the fool's paradox. To be wise, we must be foolish. To be whole, we must be broken. In the tarot, the fool's journey ends with the world, the card of completion, where the fool becomes the cosmic dancer, embodying the union of opposites. Yet, the journey never truly ends, for the world leads back to the fool, a new cycle of growth and discovery. Jung saw life as a spiral, a continuous process of becoming where each turn brings us closer to the self. The fool is our companion on this spiral, urging us to keep moving, to keep playing, to keep dreaming. As we conclude our journey, let us return to Elias, the village fool. Years after saving his village, Elias grew old, his hair white, his laughter softer. One evening, as the villagers gathered around a fire, a young boy asked, "Elias, why do you still act the fool when you've proven your wisdom?" Elias smiled, tossing a pebble into the flames. "Because, lad, the world is too heavy without laughter, and the soul is too small without wonder. To be a fool is to be alive." Dear friends, the fool lives in each of us, waiting to be unleashed. It is the child who dreams, the rebel who questions, the artist who creates. Carl Jung reminds us that the soul demands our folly, not our wisdom, for it is through folly that we find our truth. So, let us make space for the fool in our lives. Let us laugh at our mistakes, dance in the face of fear, and leap into the unknown. For in the dance of the fool, we discover the wisdom of the self, the joy of being, and the courage to become who we truly are. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May the fool guide you, and may your heart always find room for play.